Part 175. The Prophet's Hajj. By 10 after Hijrah, the Haram was finally free from non-Islamic practices, and Allah revealed,
"Surely the first house of worship, established for humanity, is the one at Mecca, a blessed sanctuary and a guide for all people. In it are clear signs and the standing place of Prophet Ibrahim. Whoever enters it should be safe, and pilgrimage to this house is an obligation by Allah upon whoever is able amongst the people, and whoever disbelieves, then surely Allah is not in need of his creation." Surah 3, verses 96 to 97.
The Prophet then announced that he is to perform Hajj, and tens of thousands of Muslims flocked to join him. He left Medina on the 25th of Thu al-Qa'dah, 10 after Hijrah, and tens of thousands more joined them as they traveled. The companions narrated that the crowds were as far as the eyes could see. Sources state 100,000 attendees, and while it would have been impossible to accurately count, there were at least tens of thousands of pilgrims. The Prophet referred to this Hajj as the farewell Hajj, but the companions did not understand that it was the Prophet's farewell to humanity. Ibn Umar said,
"We called it the farewell Hajj while the Prophet was with us, but we did not understand the implication."
It may seem obvious to the reader that the Prophet was bidding farewell to his Ummah, but the companions did not truly comprehend that the Prophet would ever leave them. He was so integral to their lives that they could not possibly imagine a life without him. They would follow the Prophet unquestioningly, so when he referred to it as the farewell Hajj, they did too. All the rules pertaining to Hajj are derived from the farewell Hajj. The Prophet clarified the Islamic methodology of Hajj and outlined the different ways of completing Hajj, as well as the expiations attached to mistakes made while performing Hajj. There are hundreds of hadiths narrated during the farewell Hajj, the most comprehensive of them being the hadith of Jabir. Ali ibn Abi Talib's great-grandson Muhammad ibn Ali, ibn Hussein ibn Ali, narrated,
"We went to Jabir ibn Abdillah, and he asked who was present. He was blind, until he came to me. I said, 'I am Muhammad, ibn Ali, ibn Hussein.' He placed his hand on my head, unfastened my top, and put his hand on my chest." It was very common for the companions to show extra reverence to the household of the Prophet. They represented the Prophet's presence on earth, and they reminded them of him. He said, "Welcome, nephew. Ask about whatever you wish." I said, "Tell us about the Hajj of the Messenger of Allah." He indicated 9 with his hand, and then he replied, "For 9 years the Messenger of Allah did not perform the pilgrimage." Then in the 10th year, he announced to the people that he would be performing Hajj. Many people came to Medina, eager to join the Messenger of Allah and to follow his actions, and we traveled alongside him until we arrived at Thu al-Hulayfa. There, Asma bint Umayz gave birth to Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, and she sent an envoy to the Messenger of Allah, asking how she should proceed. The messenger said, "Wash and cover yourself with a cloth, and put on the ihram." The Messenger of Allah prayed in the mosque, then he mounted Al-Qaswa, his camel, and she carried him to Al-Bayda. The people riding and walking in front of me stretched as far as my eyes could see, and the same went for the crowds to my right, to my left, and behind me. The Messenger of Allah was present amongst us, and he was the one who received the revelation of the Quran and understood its meaning. So whenever he did something, we would follow. He proclaimed the oneness of Allah out loud, saying, "At your service, O Allah, at your service. At your service, you have no partner. At your service. Certainly, all praise and excellence are yours, as is the dominion. You have no partner." We only had the intention of performing Hajj, and we were unaware of the possibility of performing Umrah at the same time. But when we arrived at the house alongside the messenger, he touched the corner, that is, the black stone, and then moved briskly, Ramel, for 3 circuits of the Kaaba, and walked for 4. Next, he proceeded to the station of Ibrahim and recited, "You may take the standing place of Ibrahim as a site of prayer." Surah 2, verse 125. He stood with the station between himself and the house and offered 2 units of prayer. My father used to say that the Prophet recited, "Say, He is Allah, one," that is, Surah Al-Ikhlas, and say, "O you disbelievers," that is Surah Al-Kafirun, in the 2 units of prayer. He then returned to the corner and touched it before leaving from the gate toward Safa. When he approached Safa, he recited, "Indeed, the hills of Safa and Marwa are among the symbols of Allah," Surah 2, verse 158, and said, "I will begin with that which Allah began." So he started with Safa, ascended until he could see the house, and then turned to face the Qibla, declared the oneness and the greatness of Allah, and said, "There is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, alone and without partners. The kingdom is His, and all praise and gratitude are for Him, for He is most capable of everything. There is no deity worthy of worship except Allah alone, the one who fulfilled His promise, aided His slave, and defeated the combined forces alone." The messenger repeated this supplication 3 times, and then descended towards Marwa. When he reached the center of the valley, he moved briskly, and when he began to ascend, he walked at a normal pace until he reached Marwa. At the top of Marwa, he did just as he had upon Safa, and continued to repeat in this manner. When he reached Marwa for the final time, the messenger said, "If I had known before what I know now, I would not have brought the sacrificial animals, and I would have made this an umrah. So whoever amongst you does not have a sacrificial animal with them should take off their ihram and make this an umrah." Suraka ibn Malik stood up and asked, "O Messenger of Allah, does this instruction apply for this year only, or forever?" The Messenger of Allah intertwined 2 of his fingers together and said, "Umrah has been joined with Hajj twice," before adding, "Rather, it applies forever." Ali arrived from Yemen with the sacrificial animals of the Prophet, and he found that Fatima had replaced her ihram with dyed clothes and applied kohl to her eyes. And he expressed his disapproval. Fatima informed him, "My father instructed me to do this." When he was in Iraq, Ali used to say, "I went to the Messenger of Allah, feeling annoyed at what Fatima had done, and seeking his verdict on what she had related from him. The Messenger of Allah said, 'She has told the truth, she has told the truth.' Then he asked me, 'What did you say when you undertook to perform the pilgrimage?' I said, 'O Allah, I embark on this pilgrimage with the same intention as your messenger.' The Messenger of Allah said, 'I have the sacrificial animals with me, so do not remove your ihram.'" The total number of sacrificial animals, between those brought by Ali from Yemen and those the Prophet brought himself, came to 100. Everyone removed their ihram and had their hair clipped except for the Prophet and whoever had a sacrificial animal with them. On the day of Al-Tarwiyah, that is, the 8th day of Thu al-Hijjah, they went to Mina and put on the ihram for Hajj. The Messenger of Allah rode out and led the Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, and Fajr prayers. Then he waited a while until the sun had risen. He instructed for a tent made of animal hair to be erected for him at Namira. The Messenger of Allah continued on his way, and the Quraysh were certain that he would stop at the sacred site just as they used to do in the era of ignorance. But he passed it and continued until he reached Arafat. He found the tent that had been pitched for him at Namira and stopped off there until the sun began to decline. Then he called for Al-Qaswa, and she was saddled and prepared for him. When he got down to the heart of the valley, the messenger addressed the people and said, "Certainly, your blood and your wealth are sacred, just like this sacred day of yours in this sacred month of yours in this sacred town of yours. All the matters of Jahiliyyah are abolished beneath my feet. The blood, revenge of ignorance is abolished, and the first blood, revenge I will abolish is Ibn Rabia ibn al-Harith, who was breastfed by the Banu Sa'd tribe and was killed by Hudhail. The usury of ignorance is abolished, and the first usury I will abolish is that of Abbas ibn Abdal Muttalib. It is completely wiped out. Be conscious of Allah regarding your women, for you have taken them with the trust of Allah. They have been made permissible to you by the word of Allah, and you have the right to demand that they do not allow anyone you dislike to sit on your mattress. If they do that, then reprimand them without hurting them. They have the right to provision and clothing in a wholesome manner. I have left amongst you that which, if you hold fast to it, you will never go astray, the Book of Allah. When you are asked about me on the day of judgment, what will you say?" The people replied, "We bear witness that you have conveyed the message of Islam. fulfilled your mission, and sincerely advised." The messenger raised his forefinger towards the sky and pointed at the people, saying, "O Allah, bear witness! O Allah, bear witness! O Allah, bear witness!" The azan and the iqama were called, and the messenger led the zuhr prayer. Then the iqama was called again, and the messenger led asr, without praying anything between the two. Then the messenger rode his camel until he came to the stopping point. He made Al-Qaswa face the rocks, with the path of those traveling on foot in front of him, and turned towards the Qibla. He remained standing there until the sun set. The yellow light diminished a little, and the disk of the sun had disappeared. With Usama riding behind him, the messenger pulled tightly on the reins of Al-Qaswa until her head touched the saddle, and he indicated with his right hand for the people to move with tranquility. Every time he came to a hill, he would loosen the reins a little for his camel to ascend, until we arrived at Al-Muzdalifah. There, he prayed Maghrib and Isha with one azan and 2 iqamas, without any voluntary prayers between the two, and then lay down until dawn. When the morning became clear, he prayed Fajr, preceded by an azan and iqama. He then mounted Al-Qaswa and rode until he reached the sacred site. The messenger turned to face the Qibla, supplicated Allah, glorified him, and declared his uniqueness and oneness, that is, uttered the Shahada, and he continued standing there until the morning was very bright. Before the sun rose, the messenger quickly left, with Al-Fadl ibn Abbas riding behind him. Al-Fadl was a handsome man with beautiful hair. As the messenger of Allah continued on his way, there were a group of women traveling alongside them, and Al-Fadl started looking at them. The messenger placed his hand on the face of Al-Fadl, but Al-Fadl turned to the other side and continued looking, until they arrived at the heart of Muhasir. The messenger steered and prompted Al-Qaswa a little until she took the middle path which comes out at the largest Jamrah, stoning pillars. When he came to the Jamrah by the tree, he threw 7 small pebbles like the pebbles found at the bottom of a wadi, saying Allahu Akbar with each throw. He then proceeded to the place of sacrifice and slaughtered 63 camels himself before handing over to Ali, who slaughtered the remaining animals and shared in the sacrifice. The messenger instructed for a piece of each animal to be cooked in a pot, and they both ate from the meat and drank from the broth. The messenger of Allah rode his animal again and returned to the house, praying Zuhr in Mecca. He then went to the Banu Abdal Muttalib tribe, who were responsible for providing people with Zamzam water, and said, "Draw water for me, O Banu Abdal Muttalib. If it was not for fear of the people usurping your responsibility, I would have drawn with you." So they gave him a bucket, and he drank from it.
The Prophet had an audience of up to 100,000 Muslims, most of whom were meeting him for the first time. He utilized this auspicious occasion to obliterate the notion of tribalism and unite the Ummah. The Prophet refused to accept the blood money owed to him and nullified the usury owed to his uncle Al-Abbas, making it clear that he is starting with himself and that no one is above the Sharia. In a society where women had no rights and were trampled on and abused, the Prophet specified in front of the largest audience he ever faced that they are to fear Allah in the treatment of their womenfolk. On the 9th of Dhul-Hijjah, while the Prophet was at Arafat, Allah revealed the famous verse,
"Today I have perfected your faith for you, completed my favor upon you, and chosen Islam as your way." Surah 5, verse 3.
During the caliphate of Umar, a Jewish man approached him and said,
"O commander of the believers, you have a verse in your Quran that if we had the equivalent, we would have taken it as a day of celebration."
Umar replied,
"I know exactly when this verse was revealed. The Prophet was standing on the plains of Arafat on Friday during the Greater Hajj, and Allah revealed this verse. That is, it was already a celebration in the form of Eid.
On the 10th of Dhul-Hijjah, the Prophet said, "Certainly your blood, wealth, and honor are as sacred as this day of yours, in this city of yours, in this month of yours. You will meet your Lord, and you will be asked about your actions. So do not return to disbelief or misguidance after my departure, with some of you striking the necks of others. Let whoever is present convey what I have said to whoever is absent, for perhaps some of those to whom it is conveyed will comprehend more than those who heard it directly." Then he proclaimed, Indeed, have I not conveyed?